Hey everyone, welcome to Locked on Lakers for Wednesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. The Lakers are back on the floor for training camp, and Darvin Ham says everything looks great. Next.
You are Locked on Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked on Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. It's always free. It's never behind a paywall. And Locked on Lakers on YouTube. It's where you can go hang out with upwards of 21,000 subscribers, all of whom, and that number is going to rise fast as we get into the season, Andy, as everyone is excited about what the Lakers are about to embark on, including Darvin Ham, who was effusive, Andy, in his praise of the team and the energy and the spirit in the building following day one of practice. And that is sort of just reflective. I think Darvin's reaction to the first day, the players' reaction to the first days, is really reflective of the excitement and the optimism that these guys have. And, you know, it came through on Monday. Everyone kind of understanding what the mission is here and the opportunity that's in front of them, and really excited to get going on it.
Yeah, I mean, there's an optimism about this team, and they should be optimistic. They rightly believe that they are one of the best rosters in the NBA. You know, Austin Reaves recently talked about on one of the podcasts that he was on that he thought the Lakers that the Lakers were the most talented roster in the NBA. They're coming off a Western Conference Finals appearance, so there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic. They also have a lot of reasons to get out there and play, you know, to win a championship. And also, as we've learned from training camp opening up, to maybe get the Nuggets to shut the F up. It's pretty clear they heard a lot. And really, to be fair, it's not so much the Nuggets as it was Mike Malone. Like, I'm sure
certainly
there was
more than anybody, Mike Malone.
Yeah, I mean, it was largely Mike Malone, but these guys heard it. And, you know, we've talked about this many times. It doesn't take much to get athletes, their dander up, their, you know, rabbit ears going. And in this particular case, it's a good thing because you always want to keep a team in this position that's seems like they're pretty damn close, motivated for all the reasons possible. So it's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's fun. It makes it spicy.
We you know, whether it's, you know, stuff like this, whether it's pre and halftime and post game speeches in college football related, you know, to any game Deion Sanders is involved in or whatever it is, like we have reached this sort of odd scrutiny of motivational talks as to whether or not they're actually tethered in reality, as if, like you say, Andy, any of this matters. Like, the athletes are famous for constructing the motivation that they need. And the Lakers absolutely want to win a title, all this other kind of stuff. But if you gain an extra 2% by deciding that the Denver Nuggets writ large have disrespected you, fine. It doesn't matter if they really have or haven't, if Malone was out of line. It doesn't matter. It's better for all of us because Lakers Nuggets as a real rivalry is cool.
Yeah,
and these are two really good, entertaining, well-constructed teams, and I don't want them to play nice with each other. I want them to dislike each other and go at each other really hard.
Yeah, and look, to be fair to Malone in terms of the season-long motivation that he clearly kept going for Denver, like if you look back at the predictions and the panels of experts, you know, across different networks, betting lines, the Nuggets were certainly getting decent odds to win a championship, but they were not getting front runner odds by any stretch of the imagination. Caesars had them, if you count, they had 9 teams ahead of them to win the championship in terms of odds. Basketball Reference, however they calculate their betting odds, or I guess maybe it's a consensus of odds, they were 9th. You know, they were 7th among ESPN rankings. SB Nation, nobody had Denver in the finals. USA Today, nobody had Denver in the finals. So for a while, this was actually a real thing. By the time the Nuggets and Lakers played in the Western Conference Finals, Denver was favored. But you know what? Details don't matter in this sort of thing. And again, the idea that really it's not the Nuggets talking bleep, it's one coach, and who gives a crap about the coach from the Lakers' perspective? Who cares?
Doesn't matter either.
Great.
The Lakers
Whatever.
are going to turn around and use this in ways that are detached from reality, as well as the season goes along.
LeBron and Mike
the Lakers are going to say, people thought we were too old and people didn't think we'd stay healthy and all these other things. They're going to, and ignoring the fact that, okay, maybe people are, I think they have like the 5th best odds on in terms of winning a title with our friends at the FanDuel Sportsbook. Like, they're hardly being disrespected, but that's fine. Doesn't matter. It was interesting, Darvin talking about, the activity and the enthusiasm, looked at LeBron, looked at AD, said Bron's still sharp as ever. AD's moving well, covered ground, being a stalwart on defense. A tenacious spirit at scrimmage and all that kind of stuff. One of the guys, it's funny, like LeBron and AD were on the floor as full participants in practice and in scrimmages. Austin Reaves, the young guy, was the one that was held out of scrimmage. The Lakers are taking extra care with him as training camp opens, it goes along. But he was, because of all the activity he had with Team USA this summer, smart from the Lakers to make sure that they're not setting Reaves up to hit the wall, too early this season.
Yeah, even though Reaves is, one of the younger guys on this team that's actually, with a role that matters. We saw last year, and Reaves admitted as much during the semifinals against the Warriors, he hit a bit of a wall, and he eventually found that second win. And look, that last season was the most minutes Austin Reaves had ever played at the NBA level in the regular season, before you even take into account what he was doing in the playoffs. So then you add the toll with Team USA and, all the time spent walking on the golf course. It's a lot.
It is.
So that,
and we both said, like, while we're not necessarily forecasting it, it is, if you're looking for like a good little, longer shot bet on who leads the team in minutes.
No, I am forecasting that it's going to be
you
Austin
are. I didn't think you were.
No, I am. It will be Austin.
Randy thinks Austin Reaves is actually going to lead the team in minutes. Yep. I think that is a very reasonable bet. And if nothing else, he's going to be, if not at the top, real close to it, because the Lakers are going to lean into that. We heard on Monday Reaves talking about, Darvin looking at, having him run more point and stuff like that, which makes sense. It doesn't even mean he's, like Russell, Gabe Vincent, those guys won't be on the floor, but you can play D'Angelo off ball very easily and let Reaves initiate and things like that. So the level of responsibility, it's not just the number of minutes, but the intensity of those minutes for Reaves is going to be pretty strong. Yeah. This is a guy who also gets routinely hit in the face 4 or 5 times a game.
Yeah, between his minutes average and the total amount of minutes they'd be looking for him to play, all the different floor combinations he can work with, unless he has an injury that forces him to miss, a decent chunk of the season, I am very confident Reaves is going to lead this team in minutes.
It could. All right, let's turn our attention. I mentioned D'Angelo Russell there, Andy. You had a very interesting exchange with him on Monday that is worth talking about. So we will get to that next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by Ibotta. It's football season. That means pizza. It means wings. It means various dips. And whatever you prefer at your tailgate, go all out and get some cash back on every purchase with Ibotta. The weather's starting to cool down. It's time to stock up your closet with winter clothes. And Ibotta, you can get cash back on winter coats, hats, gloves, scarves, all that stuff for the whole family. Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of grocery items, from produce to personal care or pantry items, so you can make sure you are beating inflation no matter what it is you're purchasing. Either link your loyalty account or upload your receipt after your shop. Get your cash back. It's that simple. The average Ibotta user earns $100 per year. That can cover the cost of an entire shopping trip. And other apps, they give you these points that are a hassle to redeem. You never even quite understand what it is you're doing with them with Ibotta, you get real cash back, straight cash, homie, that you can put to your bank account, your PayPal, your gift cards, and you can earn cash back on hundreds of online brands and retailers when you start with Ibotta. Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. So download the Ibotta app now. Use the code LOCKED to get started and earn your real cash back. Just go to the App Store, the Google Play Store, download the free Ibotta app, and use that code LOCKED. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store. And again, use that code LOCKED.
So we'll get to Russell here in a second, and I want to talk a little bit about Christian Wood, who also was Darvin was talking up Wood after practice. So we'll talk a little bit about that. It is worth noting, we mentioned that Jalen Hood-Schifino, like when you start walking around and looking at these guys and seeing them up close, both of us were struck by how big he is. I knew he was 6'5" or whatever it is, but like he's big. He's a big, solid dude. Got rave reviews from D'Angelo Russell and from Austin Reaves about his performance on day one. The path to playing time for Hood-Schifino, Andy, is pretty narrow. The Lakers have a lot of depth at guard. But, just as it was with Max Christie last year, it's certainly, you can envision a scenario where for 10 or 15 games, they need to give Hood-Schifino 10, 15 minutes a night. And then the rest of the time he can hang out with the South Bay team. Fans either way, whether he plays or not, want to hear encouraging things about him, in this preseason.
Yeah, you mentioned that thickness for JHS, and same thing could be said about Max Christie. Like, I know we heard all season about 15 to 20 pounds off-season muscle. It is muscle season during the summer for every NBA team.
He's in the lab, Andy.
But Max Christie looks legit swole. Like, he clearly has put on some really positive thickness. And the other thing, though, that you look at with Christie and Hood-Schifino that I find interesting and not likely a coincidence, just in terms of thinking about the way this organization has done so well, drafting either in the second round, getting guys undrafted late in the first, whatever. They are both very, almost unnervingly mature sounding for their age. Mm-hmm. Like both of them we saw this last year with Christie, but, Hood-Schifino's introductory press conference, this media day session, they sound way older than their age.
They do.
They're the opposite of the three little boys in the trench coat trying to be an adult.
but it's reflective. Castleton, I think, is the same way in terms of like the types of players that they're looking for.
I mean, hell, Reaves was. I mean, I know he's a little bit older.
I was going to say like Reaves too, but like, they clearly value high, I think, regular IQ, but certainly high basketball IQ over sort of the top end athleticism and the upside. Like, I think they are willing to trade a little bit more of that. It's a little bit like the Rams. Like, you find Cooper Kupp and, Puka Nacua and guys like that who, what's their blemish? Well, okay, their 40 time was a little slow for what you would want in a receiver. But when you look at the tape, it's like they do everything on the floor, including get downfield when you need it and all that stuff. And so it's like, are we going to let that one thing maybe that they don't do, Hood-Schifino, maybe it's, shooting a little bit of agility, whatever it might be. But the rest of the tape shows a guy who's really smart, does a lot of really small things fundamentally well. And if you're going to be if you're on a good team, the explosive athleticism, the ability to put up 25, all these other things are less important because the odds certainly, until maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years into their career of any of these guys, it's part of what makes the Reeves story so unusual, of any of these guys being asked to put up, all-star role numbers, number 1, number 2, number 3 type, numbers is really low. You need guys who can understand what you're trying to do, play a role, understand a system, fit into a defense, and all that kind of stuff. So it's very obvious to me that they will trade IQ for top-end athleticism and ceiling, from that regard. And I think that is 1000% for a team like the Lakers the right direction to go.
Yeah, I think they also too. Before we move on to Christian Wood, I think they value professionalism. And when
Absolutely,
you talk about Max Christie, he is by all accounts like you have to pull the guy out of the gym. Like he would live there if the Lakers would put a bed in there and give him the keys. The guy would never leave. Hood Schifino
probably will if he asks for a bed, they'll probably. I bet they have one.
Hood Schifino, something that came up when he was interviewed after being drafted was that during high school he became a vegetarian or essential. I don't remember if it's full vegetarian or essentially plant-based, whatever. He did that as a way of trying to get his body right for a career in professional basketball. And whether you think that's the optimal way for an athlete to eat and get nutrition, beside the point. That's ultimately for the Lakers and Hood Schifino's trainers and whatever to decide. The idea that a 15, 16-year-old kid would make that decision that early on, I guarantee that impressed Rob Pelinka and the rest of the organization when they were doing post-draft workout interviews, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. That's a really mature kid.
Before we get to Wood, you had an interesting exchange with D'Angelo Russell, who is a guy that both of us find intellectually interesting beyond his role on the floor. I know I've defended D'Lo throughout most of the summer to Lakers fans who I think have some Lakers fans, at least who I think have devalued him and kind of diminished his overall impact based on the Western Conference Finals. But he kind of is he kind of is what he is. Like there's no question about that. And to that point, you had a question for him that I think a lot of people found insightful on Monday.
Yeah, during media day, I remembered how he had talked about sort of knowing who he is as a player and who he's not. And I asked D'Angelo, quote, during your exit interview, you mentioned knowing who you are as a player, but also knowing who you're not, some of the things you may never become as a player. With that in mind, in the offseason, did you spend more time trying to accentuate your strengths and just being better at them? Or did you think about those areas of weakness and try to shore them up? And D'Angelo responded, quote, yeah, I mean, a lot of things I hear is defensive abilities. I'm not the fastest. I don't know how much faster I'm going to get. So accepting what I can do, that's bringing my mind to the defensive side of things. And that's being in the right place a lot of the times. That's communicating a lot of the times. Bring a different element. I'm not going to provide the fastest, the speed to the game. That's not what I do. So just finding ways that I can do what I already kind of do good and just kind of be great at it. And what I need to work on, obviously look in the mirror and know those things and just try to be in the best position to where it's not hurting the team or things like that. And I thought that was a really good, smart, introspective way of thinking about it from D'Lo. And, I put this out on Twitter at Cam Brothers, and the majority of response, first of all, just got a lot of engagement. So clearly Laker fans found it interesting. I saw a few people wondering if that was D'Lo kind of offering up a ready-made excuse, like using a lack of speed as an excuse for his defensive shortcomings. And I didn't get the impression at all that's what he meant, because as he said, he has an accountability and a responsibility to do the best that he can.
Right. That's also, it's like, so if it's an excuse, it's an explanation. It's like, it still doesn't, he's acknowledging the problem. It's like, if he
said, I'm a better defender than my reputation, and I don't get where this is coming from, that's an issue. That's excuse making.
But after the break, I think the way he answered that question, though, is part of why I think he angers a subset of Lakers fans, and also why I think it's unfair. So we'll do that, and then we'll turn our attention to Christian Wood next. I mean, I think the premise of your question is an interesting one. I know it's something we talked about at exit interviews, and we've kind of probed a little bit with D'Lo before, is this idea of what do you lean into? Do you lean into what you're really good at and try to hide the things that you're not? And obviously you always want to improve and so on and so forth. But especially it's like Russell says, like he's 28, 29, something like that. He's not getting faster. Like you can mess with these things at the margin, improve your footwork, get a little more agile, whatever it might be. But broadly speaking, D'Angelo Russell's not going to get faster now than he was when he broke into the league.
This is not a conditioning issue. It's not a weight. We're not talking about, James Harden, or for those who have been following the league a while, it's not a Ray Felton situation. D'Lo is in shape. He's not overweight.
Not, by NBA standards, super fast and super quick.
No.
But in the same way we talk about how organizations have to take particularly role players and identify what they're really good at and figure out ways to accentuate those things and de-emphasize the stuff that they're not good, is one of the I think, the Lakers were incredibly successful with that with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, for example. They figured him out and learned how to put him in positions where he became not just a regular good role player, but an excellent one. And what D'Lo's doing is that on a personal level. And I think that's the right approach. I
agree.
You can't fix what you can't fix. And so how can I mitigate those things by being smarter, by being well positioned? Now, he does need to improve, I think, probably the intensity of his defense and stuff like that. Maybe that's the answer fans were looking for. I have to be hyper intense and hyper focused, and I haven't always been that, whatever. But philosophically, I understand what he's talking about, and I appreciate that approach to sort of self-reflection.
Yeah, to some degree, the difference between what he talked about with, making sure that he's always in the right place and communicating and just looking to play the mental side and, in certain respects, the technique side of defense.
Understanding team structures,
right,
things like that.
That type of focus and attention to detail is in some ways the same thing as hyper intensity. It just may not have the same body language. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You can be just as laser focused about it and have a pretty calm demeanor. And I would say most people wouldn't care as long as you're effective. Tim Duncan was an all-time great defender, and that guy was one of the most stoic superstars in NBA history. It didn't matter because he always did everything, at an elite level. So nobody cared what his demeanor was.
Yeah, and I think the argument is that he doesn't fulfill that.
No, that is a different argument, right. And he does need to be better. It's not enough to just come to Jesus and then not improve.
Right.
you have to do something with it. You have to be the best version of yourself. I think you agree. I don't think D'Lo is the best version he can be defensively on a regular basis. I think he can be better. In the same way that
better, and I think he has got certain strength. It's interesting. We'll move on to Wood here in a second. I was looking at when you look at the roster, and Darvin Ham. There was a clip I think I retweeted it. I don't remember at Cam Brothers where he was talking about LeBron at center and playing 3-guard lineups, and I know that's going to freak people out.
Details matter, people. Context matters.
And the details with the Lakers is when you start to look at the roster and the potential for 3 guards and swingmen and sort of 2 threes and the combinations of players, including guys like Reaves and Christie and D'Lo, that can play in these spots. The smallest guard they have on the roster, smallest player they have on the roster is Gabe Vincent at 6'3.5" or whatever he is. They are a long.
Gabe Vincent is the only small guard on this roster, period.
Yes, he's the smallest guy on the team.
Right. But he's the only, small guard. It's not even just that he's the smallest guy on the team. He's the only small guard they have.
Period. Right. And so when Darvin talks about, I'm not saying that all these lineups are going to be perfect and this is what you want to run with regularly or whatever, but like you say, the details and the context of who these players are is really significant. The Lakers don't necessarily have to give up a lot of length to deploy 3-guard lineups, and it's worth mentioning. I'm sure it's something that will come up throughout training camp. We talked about self-reflection and self-evaluation. Christian Wood was the topic of conversation following practice on Tuesday, the first practice of training camp, and got high marks from Darvin about his defensive intensity. Christian Wood said his first practice was great and talked about the competitiveness. And Darvin said he wants to be elite defensively, truly extremely engaged on the defensive part at practice. He said it was one of the main voices that he heard. Lakers are clearly trying to both give him confidence on that end and I think demonstrate that this is how you're going to get both the playing time that you want, but also the contract that you want coming out of, like, this is what needs to change. And it's reflective. Like, if there was one thing that happened on Monday that I didn't love, Wood was asked about, the situation he was in this summer where kind of nobody wanted to pay him. A lot of teams were willing to give him the veterans minimum, but nobody wanted to pay him anything more than that. And whether or not he had something to prove. And he kind of went into a long response about how he's put up, I think he's saying, I put up 17 and 10, and my numbers have always been really good, and I've never had problems with coaches. And you go back and ask everyone, other than that, that thing in Houston where he said he was sticking up for a teammate that probably most people have forgotten about completely. I know I had. And
I have no idea what he's talking about.
I really didn't either, but other people do.
What he's talking about.
But he kind of went through all these things, and what I didn't hear was, and this doesn't mean he doesn't understand it, but I didn't hear it in the answer, was an understanding and an acknowledgement of how he got into this situation that brought him to the Lakers and made him available to begin with. And I'm not trying to say that one answer at media day is reflective of the guy's personality or shows he's a problem. I don't know him. I haven't seen him. And I don't think it's fair to judge him completely by what brought him here. But that said, I didn't love the answer because it is the defensive stuff. It is the lack of commitment to the details that make you a good player on a good team that made him available. It's pretty obvious. And I would have loved to hear him say, I haven't been good enough defensively. I haven't done this. I need to prove to people that I can be a role player on a great team or whatever it might be. But that's what the Lakers are trying to prime him to be able to do. And I think they're starting it off with, praise and kindness and pumping him up, which is, that's very Darvin. And it's, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. I mean, Darvin has a really good track record of making this sort of approach work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
the idea holding people accountable at the same time.
Yeah. The idea that Christian Wood has not clashed with coaches is ridiculous. I mean, it's been very well documented that he and Jason Kidd did not get along last season at all. They're already, I've seen some reports that Jason Kidd during Mavericks Media Day talked about how, in so many words, they have everyone here for the right reasons. Nobody's worrying about how many points they're scoring or how many shots they're getting, where the shots are coming from. And a lot of people have taken that as a dig at Christian Wood.
Not Reggie Bullock.
No, yes, that infamous malcontent Reggie Bullock, who, right. By the way, the half season we covered him, really nice guy.
Super nice dude. And landed in Houston, I believe.
They could use him. He'll be helpful. To be fair to Christian Wood, Jason Kidd himself has a track record of getting along really well with players and organizations. Until he doesn't.
Right.
It always starts great, always ends poorly. He's kind of the ideal coach for James Harden in that respect. Mm-hmm. But Jason Kidd is not always easy to get along with, to be fair. Sure. That being said, and look, to play a devil's advocate, advocate for Christian Wood, like the idea of you mentioned before, like what's expected of him as a role player, the previous stops that he was in, at least once he started having like a full-time role, whether you're talking about in Detroit, whether you're talking about Houston, whether you're talking about Dallas, to be fair to Christian Wood, as much as an inflated sense of who he is as a player, stature in the league, that's been recurrent enough that you need to keep your eye on it. It's fair from his perspective to feel like I wasn't supposed to be a role player in Detroit. I wasn't supposed to be just a role player in Houston. I wasn't even just supposed to be a role player in Dallas. I was one of the best players on that team, if nothing else, as a scorer. Like I was
right, but I think this is what I think is so fascinating about this experiment.
I want to make clear, I'm not looking to absolve him of anything. I'm just saying, to be fair, from his perspective, he could feel like, look, if you want me to be a role player, I can be a role player. I don't feel like I was asked to be a role player before.
That may be, and I wasn't, in these places, and to some degree, it's like we'll see what happens here. Like context matters. I think they would disagree with that in Dallas, but also too, I think he has I think the knock is he's got a very narrow definition of what good means.
My role is to be a star. That's the
right.
role player.
And what, and too tightly equates, look at the numbers I'm putting up with I'm good.
Yeah.
And what is fascinating about this experiment to me is there is a devil's advocate position for almost none of these places that he's stopped have been really good, solid, stable environments. And you can't blame that on Wood. I mean, Detroit, when he was there, was all kinds of doing weird things. And, they seem to be in a better direction now, but they weren't then. That said, they needed young players and they got rid of them. Houston was tire fire in that era and let him go. Dallas had a little more structure, but like you say, Jason Kidd is notoriously salty. And, that thing devolved quickly last year. And so the Lakers wanted him. They put out the effort. The context is different. And so we'll see how it goes. And it's really up to Wood. And he doesn't have, it's like D'Lo. He doesn't have to be Giannis defensively. He needs to be adequate. If Wood is adequate defensively, in the same way that Russell is adequate defensively, game changers in terms of what the Lakers can do and the optionality that they have in their lineup. So plenty more to cover in training camp as practices roll along. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can see the show, hang out with upwards of 21,000 subscribers. And looking forward to bringing you all the news and analysis throughout training camp. And as the preseason begins on Saturday, I'm very excited there. We'll see everyone tomorrow.